Welcome to our regular newsletter feature on our cat-friendly principles. In each of the past 6 newsletters, we've featured and discussed one of our first 6 principles with a sector expert. And a quick recap on what they are: respect cats, keep cats well, do cats no harm, be solution-driven for cats, communicate for cats, and collaborate for cats. And these recorded conversations are available to view on our YouTube channel if you're interested in checking them out. And today we're going to be featuring our 7th and final principle, which is evolve for cats. Be innovative, remain curious, and keep learning for cats. And to bring this principle to life, I have the pleasure of discussing it with my brilliant colleague here at International Cat Care, Vicky Halls. Hi, Vicky.
Hi, Lindsay.
Welcome.
Thank you. This is going to be fun.
It is. It is. We've talked about this a lot, so I think this is going to be a really interesting discussion. Vicky, I normally like to start these discussions with an introduction. Now, no doubt our audience is familiar with you and your role of head on cats here at iCatCare, but they may not know exactly what you do. Could you share a little bit about what your role involves?
Yes, I will. Myself and my team, we are really responsible for all the work that the charity does with and for those who work with unowned cats, basically. So it's going to be everything from, let's say, supporting governments anywhere in the world to create legislation or programs relating to cat population management on a sort of big scale. Right down to creating courses for people who work in homing centres or shelters or foster networks. And we also have this really amazing resource based on our website, which is a huge amount of practical information for people who work in the sector. So it's curating all of that, creating new resources, new learning. That's what we do.
Wonderful. And of course, our audience may not realize that I am in your team.
Yes.
You are indeed my manager. Vicky, before you started working with Unowned Cats, no, let me rephrase that. Before you started working at iCatCare, because I know you've worked with Unowned Cats for a while before that. Before you started working at iCatCare, what's your background? What did you do?
Very early on, I was in sales and middle management of various commodities. But I started working with cats in the 1980s. And it's a journey, it's probably quite familiar to some people. You start off as a volunteer with your local RSPCA branch, and then suddenly it turns into something. And I ended up working for them I think the role was called cattery supervisor. But I was a bit of a thorn in the flesh of my bosses there, because I kept saying, but what if, but why? And, so we're worming the cats and we're defleeing them, but how do they feel? And that was a terrible question to ask in the 1980s, because there just wasn't the answers there. And I guess I'm going to use the word, my career evolved because I had that desire for knowledge. So I was offered a role at a local veterinary clinic, and the trade-off was, if you manage the transition to create this new clinic, we will support you in your training as a veterinary nurse. So I trained and qualified as a veterinary nurse. And then, because I was still asking why and what and how, I then started my training as a clinical behaviourist, which was called in those days a cat behaviour counsellor, specialising in cats. Worked with dogs initially, didn't really feel the love. Loved dogs, but my passion was with the cats, and the whole profession was evolving. There it is again at the time, and so I was sort of on the crest of that wave, and it was a wonderful period. So I worked in clinical behaviour in a practice for about 25 years.
Yes.
And also during that time, I trained and qualified to be a human counsellor. And I also worked for the NHS in a doctor's surgery, and I was in private practice as well. I think that's it. I did write a lot of books as well for the general public, just
How
fun.
many?
I think I've got another one coming out in November, actually. I think it's 8 or 9.
Yes. I asked you that question for a purpose, actually, because I think
Okay.
your career history really exemplifies your commitment to always your curiosity and your commitment to keep learning. And I think that's how you've had this really interesting squiggly career that you have, because you chase knowledge and and that leads you places that are really exciting.
Yeah, I'm still chasing it.
Well, exactly. And I think, as you know, I'm thrilled that you're here talking with me about this principle. And I chose you really because since the first time I met you, I guess, would that be, I don't know, 10 or 11 years ago?
Must be now, yeah. Yeah.
And we've worked in, different capacities during that time. But since our very first meeting, long before cat friendly principles existed, you have, to me, exemplified the evolve principle in your approach to everything, but particularly with working with unowned cats. And for me, um, I've looked up to you as my mentor for years, and you've really modeled the way of what it means to live the evolve for cats principle. So thank you for being here to talk about it with us. I think a really good starting place perhaps is for you to tell us, what does the evolve for cats principle mean to you?
I think you've said it really. I suppose people would say, oh, the most important ones must be the ones related to cats because that's what this is all about. And yeah, sure. I mean, they're all equally important. There's no sort of hierarchy here. But we can only improve cat welfare if we work together, if we do it through people.
Mm.
Because improvement of cat welfare is absolutely in the hands of people.
Mm.
So, there's so many people I know, I've spoken to loads of people over the years where, you're in a room of people who work in the sector and you say, who loves animals? They will go, yay. Who loves people? Ooh. There's that, almost like it has to be one or the other. But actually, if you embrace both of them, you do need to work with people in order to be able to improve the welfare of cats. And Evolve for Cats is, as you've kind of alluded to before, it's my favourite. It's absolutely my favourite principle because I think if we all embrace that principle, the world for cats would be a very different place and a better place.
That's so true. And evolving, it sounds so attractive and sensible, doesn't it? I mean, if we didn't evolve, where would we be? Where would we be as people if we hadn't evolved?
I really honestly believe this. If people in general did not evolve, we would all be working by candlelight and dying of diphtheria. I genuinely believe that because so many, every sector out there understands that things progress and move and people innovate and they're creative and they're constantly seeking out new knowledge. And that's a wonderful way to be because you always know that as a species, we are constantly evolving in our knowledge. And I think that's really exciting. And I'm not sure, for a whole heap of different reasons, that it's there in spades in the unowned cat sector.
I agree. Why do you think that is?
Well, having sort of been immersed in it for decades now and talking to loads and loads of people, and these are incredibly passionate, hardworking people who've worked with unowned cats for years and years and years. But when it comes to the idea of learning, for many people, there are there are a lot of reasons why they don't go down that route. And it comes back, I think, to this idea that when you've worked with cats for many, many years, you know what you need to know. You have that wealth of experience. And don't get me wrong, that experience is incredibly important. But if you underpin that experience with some good evidence-based knowledge, that becomes a superpower.
Absolutely.
That's when it really makes a difference. And the reason why that is, and I think it's not unique to cats, but cats really make it difficult to understand them. So if they don't show in their body language and their faces exactly what's going on in their world, we will see that sort of enigmatic expression and we can assume that expression means something. And if that assumption is wrong at that point, then you go down a load of rabbit holes. And I think that's why that underpinning of knowledge is so important. But equally, and I know that I've experienced this at times, when people start to think about, oh, she's done that for a long time, she really knows her stuff, you know, she knows what she's talking about, she's very experienced, so I look up to her for knowledge. You don't want to, if that's how people perceive you, you don't want to admit necessarily that either you don't know the answer or the answer you thought was right isn't actually right. So to step through that door and put yourself in that position is hard. I can see why people are reluctant to do it. And of course, the other thing is the pace at which people work in this sector is so intense. I've heard people say, I do not have the physical and emotional energy or the time to learn something new.
I think that's so true. And I think also it's difficult sometimes to look back and identify when we got things wrong. And we got it wrong with the very best information and the knowledge we had at that time. So there's no shame in that. There's no guilt in that. And I think one thing that, I've seen you do for over a decade, and you are, definitely a cat expert. But even you're always learning and reflecting. And part of that is acknowledging, oh, maybe that didn't go so well, or maybe I could have made that decision differently, or maybe that wasn't the best outcome for that cat. What could we do the next time? But you're right. It's not easy to do. And in fact, I think it's uncomfortable to do. And this kind of segues into something that you and I also talk about fairly regularly, which is the Dunning-Kruger effect, which in really simple terms for our audience is essentially the inverse correlation between confidence and competence. So in other words, the less someone knows, the more confident they might be, because we don't know what we don't know. We can also call this unconscious incompetence. And then as one learns more and develops their knowledge and skill, there's often a dip in confidence and perhaps even performance while one tries and learns new things. But then as one develops those skills and sticks with it, confidence and competence both grow together, which is the ideal. I mean, that's what we want. And this is not just applicable to the unknown cat sector. It's applicable to learning anything new, and certainly in any line of work. Vicky, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on this, particularly in the unknown cat sector? Have you seen it?
It's human nature, so it's there. It's out there. Definitely would agree with you. And it's really hard to get your head around the idea of we don't know what we don't know, because you can't make that judgment because
you don't know. You're not aware of it. Yeah.
But also to go from that state of not knowing what you don't know and then discovering something that you didn't know and realizing that in the light of that knowledge, looking back, it doesn't reflect so well on what you've done before, sort of thing. That's a really uncomfortable place to be, really uncomfortable. And you have to, at some stage in the learning process, you have to say, look, actually, it is a courageous thing to put yourself in that state of discomfort, but acknowledge that there's no shame in not having information before. The shame would come, I have to say, in having the information and not changing your way of working in light of that information. But I have to say that within the sector, there are some people who absorb knowledge like blotting paper. They love it like a sponge. And that's great. And we'd love those people to go around and tell all the people that are a bit scared of starting that process, actually, it's great. It's really good, because it does feel like a superpower.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because then you can be genuinely confident in what you're doing, but also always keep your mind on the fact, I can do the very best I can do with the knowledge I have. However, I'm also going to be reflective. So I'm going to monitor the outcome of what I've done. I'm going to think about it, and I might change something so that I can be better at what I do, so that I can go from good to excellent. I mean, you know what it's like in our team. We constantly have reflective meetings. How did it go? What could we have done better?
Exactly.
How can we improve on this the next time we deliver this, or and that's just something we do naturally now. And that's the great thing. Once you've gone through that discomfort phase, the idea of learning and changing and being innovative and creative becomes part of you.
Absolutely. And not the expectation that we always get it right. Actually, the acknowledgement that we know sometimes we won't get it right, but we reflect on that and we learn from it, and then we can do better the next time.
And often evolution comes from learning from your mistakes.
Absolutely.
Doesn't make you a bad person.
I think it's interesting because in many professions, CPD, continued professional development, in other words, learning, is not only required, but also really valued.
Yeah.
For example, in medicine, where evolving and working in new and improved ways is not only highly regarded, but indeed it saves lives. How can we normalize learning? And as a result of that new knowledge, how can we positively reframe the change process to work perhaps differently?
That's a really good question. And I think that's really part of what we're trying to do. First we must engage with our audience, with our sector. And hopefully they're going to embrace the idea that what they do is incredibly valuable. And we want to support them. And the best way we can support them is to ensure that they have all the knowledge that they need, and the educational resources and whatever else it is, in order for them to do their job as well as they can and help as many cats as they can in the best way possible. But it's one of those things that you can't force people into that mindset. So one of the things that we do, as as an organization, is we listen. We try to gain insight about the challenges that people face. And bear in mind, these challenges, there are some that are pretty much constant throughout the world, but there are a lot of challenges that are very unique to countries, cultures, situations. And we need to acknowledge that so that we can support people in the right way. And learning is one of those things that you have to make the active choice to step into that. And if people choose to do that, we're with them every step of the way. We've also got to bear in mind that a lot of people in this business are volunteers. This is not their main paid job. And so the idea of, I'm doing this as a volunteer, I'm working as hard as I can. Where's the time for that learning? We need to try and help people to understand that actually trying to find the time to do that learning is going to save you time in the long term. Do you know what really worries me, Lindsey? I think if we don't get that critical mass of people who get excited about learning and developing and finding new ways of helping cats. The sector is destined to do the same thing day in, day out forever. And the situation isn't going to get any better. It's only going to get worse as more and more cats are born into a situation where they are excess to the demand for cats, and the world cannot look after them well. And I worry about the people. I worry about the people in the sector because they're already under a huge amount of pressure and they're working so hard. And I don't want to watch this as an observer, this sort of slow motion car crash. I want to be there to support people, to help them through this.
Quite. And do you think it's fair to say there's almost society being largely anthropomorphic and sentimental, that there's almost I'll frame it, a dangerous value placed on the rescue worker who just work tirelessly around the clock, and it takes enormous emotional and physical toll on themselves, on the individual, but then it's valued. And how dangerous that can be, not only for the person who is doing their absolute most to deliver the very best for cats, but also the impact it has on them. And then, of course, there's no space to evolve because it's just constant work and pressure, which I think is a really difficult situation that many people find themselves in. Do you think that's fair?
I do. And it worries me. I wish we could reframe that. Because these people have value, much more value beyond self-sacrifice.
Absolutely.
We shouldn't, at the end of the day, let's be practical about this. You can only care for cats well if you care for yourself well. Otherwise, it's a slippery slope. So the idea that in order to be valued, you have to work 24/7 and never have any enjoyment in your life and sacrifice so much and devote so much time, it's not sustainable. I don't want to be somebody who stands back and watches people spiral downwards because all they're trying to do is the best job they possibly can under really difficult circumstances. And people are with the best intentions, this is all with the best intentions, enabling them to do that without supporting them to let's step back and see how you can do this in a more sustainable way for your own physical and mental well-being. Because there is a way forward. And I think it's the duty of all the larger organisations to support the smaller ones, and for us all to, another one of our cat-friendly principles, collaborate. We need to work together to get ourselves out of this mess at the moment.
Yes. And I think we touched on this already. Would you add anything to one of the things I wanted to ask you is what are the risks if we don't evolve? We've certainly covered the impact it has on the individual. Do you think there are any other risks that we haven't mentioned?
The risk to cats. The very species that we love so much, which is why we want to work with them, we want to impact positively on them. It's not going to be good for them unless we all group together and work collaboratively to improve the current situation of an excess population and loads of other difficult things that conspire against people to successfully keep their cats and care for cats. And part of that collaboration is for us to take new knowledge and use that new knowledge to help us to work in a even more effective way under these very difficult circumstances. It's a hard time at the moment, Lindsay, it really is.
Agreed, entirely. And what if we do evolve? So what would the future look like if the unowned cat sector does follow the Evolve for Cats principle?
Well, it'll take a while. This is a long-term strategy, and we'll still need all those wonderful people to do their rescue work. But we also need an element of the sector and everyone to put some of their brain into that space of how can we deal with the root cause of this problem rather than constantly addressing the symptoms. And that's where the future benefit lies, in learning how to first identify the problem and how to address it. And it's very multifactorial, it's very nuanced, it's very different in different places, different parts of the world. But if we can identify that and work together, we can start to address the root problem. And if you take one of those problems as being very simplistically numbers, we need to really work out how we can effectively and strategically ensure that we are neutering cats at the right level in the right way. That's a big one.
And it takes a lot of different parts fitting together, you know, in certainly a jigsaw puzzle type of way that we talk about a lot.
Yeah.
If you could give a message to anyone who is evolving for cats and on their own, you know, learning journey, or, you know, interested to work in a new way just to be more impactful, what message would you give to them?
First message would be, I want to get to know you. I want you to connect with us as an organization, because you are just the kind of people that we want to have in our club, for want of a better word. And we have some wonderful opportunities to learn new things, which are, we would hope to think, really enjoyable learning experiences coming up this year. If I can just plug our iCat Connect event, which is a live event that occurs over 2 days in the middle of the day. So hopefully we're going to be able to embrace quite a few time zones across the world on the 13th and 14th of November. And this is a really, I hope, exciting event for people, because it takes everybody through a journey of how we can identify and look at root causes, how we can work in shelters, how we can strategically plan TNR programs. It just takes us through that entire journey over 2 days. And we've got some wonderful speakers, and they're lovely, really engaging short presentations. But also we will have all those presentations available on our website. And we will also have loads of resources for people to look at so that they can really digest the content. And we hope to be able to offer those in other languages as well, which hopefully will be able to reach more people. We have a whole suite of micro learnings, which we're developing at the moment, as you know, working really hard to do that. And micro learnings are basically just small learning experiences that people can do when they sit down for a cup of coffee or just take a break. But these are really impactful little pieces of learning that people can build on and create their own learning pathway. And we also have a wonderful coaching program, which is all about our cat-friendly homing model, which is how to work in shelters or foster networks in a really cat-friendly, effective way. And the coaching program is bespoke. We will coach individual organizations to help them through that process. So we're really trying to make this as accessible as possible for people. And it's free. So, yeah. So we'd love people to join us, just connect with us. It doesn't matter where you are or what you're doing. If you want to learn but feel there are barriers to it, still get in touch and we can see if we can remove those barriers.
Thank you, Vicky. I think, and for anybody who is interested in that, either continuing your learning journey or just starting one, I mean, it takes courage to embrace new knowledge and perhaps apply that to work a bit differently. And as Vicky said, we're certainly here to support you, and do get in touch if we can help you in your evolution for cats. Vicky, thank you so much for joining me to talk about our 7th cat-friendly principle, Evolve for Cats.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Lindsay. Thank you.